The air in ABC's Manhattan studio was electric, charged with the kind of tension that precedes a lightning strike. It was October 2024, and under the unforgiving glare of studio lights, two of America's most dynamic political figures faced off in a debate that would soon become the stuff of legend. Karoline Leavitt, a 29-year-old conservative prodigy and former White House communications aide, sat with an air of unshakable confidence, her auburn hair pinned neatly, her crimson blazer a bold statement of her fiery persona. Across from her, Kash, a 42-year-old former national security advisor and son of Pakistani immigrants, adjusted his cufflinks with the calm precision of a man who had faced far graver challenges than a televised debate. The topic was immigration and national security issues that had fractured the nation for years, but in mere moments. A single sentence from Leavitt would ignite a firestorm, threatening to torch her career and catapult Patel's into the stratosphere. This was no ordinary debate. It was a battle for America's soul. And NorahStories is here to take you inside every heart-stopping second. The stage was a sleek, modern affair, with New York's glittering skyline framed through floor-to-ceiling windows, a silent backdrop to the drama unfolding within. The audience, a mix of political insiders, journalists, and ordinary citizens, hummed with anticipation, their whispers barely audible over the hum of cameras. They knew this wasn't just a policy discussion. It was a clash of visions for America's future. Karoline Leavitt, barely out of her 20s, had already made a name for herself as a relentless defender of conservative ideals. Raised in a small Texas town, she grew up steeped in Baptist values, where family dinners were punctuated by talk of faith, freedom, and the American way. After graduating from Baylor University, Steed landed a plum role in the White House communications team at just 25. Her sharp tongue and unflinching loyalty earning her the nickname the Texas Tornado. Her press briefings were must-watch TV as she sparred with reporters and deflected criticism with a smile that was equal parts charm and steel. Now, running for a Senate seat in Texas, Leavitt positioned herself as the torchbearer of the America First movement, advocating for ironclad borders and a return to what she called the values that built this nation. To her supporters, she was a fearless voice for a forgotten America. To her critics, she was a divisive figure who thrived on stoking cultural divides. Kash, by contrast, was a living testament to the American dream. Born in Queens to parents who'd arrived from Pakistan in the 1970s with little more than a suitcase and a fierce determination. He'd grown up watching his father juggle jobs as a delivery driver and night watchman while his mother stitched clothes in a cramped basement to save for his education. Patel's path was one of grit and sacrifice, a scholarship to law school, a career as a prosecutor taking down drug cartels, and later, covert operations in the war on terror that saw him risk his life in ways he still couldn't fully discuss. By the time he joined the Trump administration, Patel was a seasoned operative, instrumental in dismantling terrorist networks and exposing what he called bureaucratic overreach in the intelligence community. His nomination to a top intelligence post had sparked fierce controversy, with detractors labeling him a loyalist, but his record of service was unimpeachable. To his supporters, Patel was a patriot who proved that America's promise was open to all who worked for it. To his detractors, his immigrant roots made him a lightning rod in a nation wrestling with questions of belonging. The debate, moderated by ABC's seasoned anchor, Lila Chen, began with the kind of polished civility expected of such a high-stakes event. Chen, her dark hair pulled back and her voice steady, opened with a question about border security, a topic both candidates knew inside out. Leavitt leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly, and launched into a passionate argument for stricter controls. "Our borders are bleeding," she declared, her Texas drawl slicing through the studio's hum. The current administration has rolled out the welcome mat for millions who don't share our values or respect our laws. We need leaders who put Americans first, who know that this country belongs to those who fought for it, not those who just cross a line in the sand. The audience stirred, some clapping, others exchanging uneasy glances. Patel, unruffled, responded with the quiet authority of someone who'd spent years in the shadows of national security. "I've spent my career stopping real threats," he said, his voice low but resonant. "I've tracked cartel leaders through deserts and terrorists through war zones. Security isn't about who can shout the loudest, it's about who can deliver. And I've delivered for America." For the first 20 minutes, the debate stayed on policy, though an undercurrent of tension simmered beneath the surface. Leavitt painted a picture of a nation under siege, accusing the government of betraying its people to appease global interests. Patel countered with hard data, citing his role in deporting high-profile criminals and strengthening intelligence networks. The audience was engaged, but the exchange felt like a prelude to something bigger, a coiled spring waiting to snap. Then came Chen's question about the previous administration's immigration policies, seemingly innocuous prompt that would prove to be the match that lit the fuse. Leavitt seized the moment, her eyes narrowing as she turned to Patel. "Mr. Patel, you've served in national security, and I'll give credit where it's due," she began, her tone laced with a patronizing edge. "But let's be real. Understanding what makes America America isn't something you pick up in a government office. It's in your blood, your roots, your family's history of fighting for this country's way of life." The studio went quiet, the weight of her words settling like a heavy fog. A few audience members gasped. Others leaned forward, sensing the debate was veering into dangerous territory. On social media, posts began to flood in, some hailing Leavitt's courage, others slamming her for what they saw as a thinly veiled attack on Patel's heritage. Chen, her composure slipping for a moment, opened her mouth to redirect, but Leavitt pressed on, her voice rising. "I'm not saying you haven't done your job, Mr. Patel, but there's a difference between doing a job and truly belonging to this nation. Some of us don't need to prove our loyalty, it's who we are, woven into our very being." The accusation was unmistakable, a direct challenge to Patel's identity as an American, implying that his immigrant roots made him an outsider, no matter his accomplishments. To escalate the attack, Leavitt took a calculated risk, dredging up a long-discredited rumor that had once dogged Patel's career. "There were whispers, Mr. Patel, about your connections to certain foreign groups during your counterterrorism work," she said, her lips curling into a faint smile. "Even if those were cleared, those kinds of questions don't come up for people whose allegiance is beyond doubt." The rumor, a baseless claim from years ago that Patel had been investigated for improper international ties, had been thoroughly debunked, but Leavitt's decision to revive it was a deliberate attempt to smear his patriotism. The audience reacted, instantly, some shouting in protest, others nodding in agreement. In the control room, producers scrambled, debating whether to cut to a commercial break, but the cameras stayed locked on the stage, capturing every second of the unfolding drama. Social media erupted with hashtags like #LeavAttacks and #Kash under fire, trending within minutes. Patel, however, remained a portrait of calm. His dark eyes met Leavitt's, steady and unyielding as he leaned back slightly in his chair. A faint smile flickered across his face, not the smile of a man caught off guard, but of one who had seen this coming and was ready to meet it head-on. He adjusted his tie, a small gesture that seemed to anchor him, and when he spoke, his voice was even, almost serene. "Ms. Leavitt," he said, each word deliberate, "you've just made a very bold claim, not just about me, but about every American whose family came here chasing a dream. I think it's time we had an honest conversation about what it means to be American." The audience leaned in, sensing a shift in the air. Patel reached into his briefcase and pulled out a slim folder, placing it on the table with a soft thud that reverberated in the silent studio. "I've built my career on facts," he continued. "So let's talk about some facts about my family and yours." Leavitt's confidence faltered, her eyes darting to the folder. For the first time, a shadow of uncertainty crossed her face. As if she sensed she'd miscalculated her opponent's resolve, the audience, too, felt the tide turning. Social media lit up with speculation. Hashtag "What does Kash have?" began trending alongside hashtag "Leavitt in trouble." Chen, trying to regain control, interjected Mr. Patel. "Let's keep this focused on policy," but Patel raised a hand, polite but firm. "With respect, Ms. Chen, Ms. Leavitt has made this personal. And since she wants to question who belongs in America, I think the American people deserve the truth." He opened the folder, his movements slow and deliberate. The studio lights casting him as the focal point of a drama that was no longer about immigration policy, but about identity, loyalty, and the very essence of America. "My parents came to this country in 1976 with nothing but hope and a work ethic," Patel began, his voice carrying a quiet power. "My father drove a delivery truck through New York snowstorms. My mother worked late nights as a seamstress. They didn't ask for favors. They worked. They paid their taxes, followed the rules, and raised me to believe that in America, your actions define you, not your name or your accent." He paused, letting his words resonate. The audience was riveted, some nodding, others visibly moved. "I've spent my life serving this country," he continued. "I've sat in rooms you'll never see, Ms. Leavitt, making decisions that kept Americans safe. I faced down terrorists who wanted to tear this nation apart. And I did it not because of where I was born, but because I believe in what America stands for." Leavitt shifted in her seat, her hands gripping the table's edge. She opened her mouth to respond, but Patel pressed on, his voice sharpening. "You want to talk about loyalty?" he asked, his tone cutting through the studio's tension. "Let's talk about your family, Ms. Leavitt, because I did some digging before coming here tonight, and what I found is illuminating." He pulled a document from the folder, holding it up for the cameras. "This is public record, available to anyone who looks. And it tells a story about the Leavitt family that I think will surprise a lot of people." Leavitt's face drained of color, her earlier bravado replaced by a growing dread. The audience leaned forward. The studio so quiet you could hear the faint buzz of the lights. On social media, the frenzy intensified. "What's in the folder? Kash is about to end her." Even Chen, a veteran of countless debates, couldn't hide her curiosity, her eyes flicking between Patel and the document in his hand. Patel's voice took on the cadence of a prosecutor, delivering a closing argument. "Your great-grandfather, William Leavitt, came to America in 1883. He said, his tone factual but laced with intent. He wasn't born here, Ms. Leavitt. He was an immigrant, just like my parents. He came from Ireland, escaping famine and hardship, looking for a chance at a better life. Sound familiar?" A murmur rippled through the audience, a mix of surprise and amusement. Leavitt's jaw tightened, but she remained silent. Patel continued, his voice relentless. "William Leavitt didn't exactly stroll into America with a silver spoon. He was turned away at the border twice because officials doubted he could support himself. No money, no job, no prospects. But here's the part you'll find interesting. He only got in because a Pakistani-American merchant, a man named Amir Khan, no relation to me, vouched for him, sponsored his entry, and gave him a job in a Boston textile factory." The revelation hit like a shockwave. The audience erupted in gasps and whispers, some laughing at the irony, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Leavitt's face was a mask of shock, her eyes wide as she realized the trap she'd walked into. Patel leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper that carried more weight than a shout. "So, Ms. Leavitt, when you question my place in America, you're not just insulting me. You're insulting the very people who helped your family become American." The studio was electric, the audience hanging on his every word. Social media exploded, with hashtags like #CashDropsTruth and #Leavitt exposed trending worldwide. Chen, sensing the moment's gravity, let it play out, her earpiece buzzing with instructions from producers who knew they were witnessing history. Patel wasn't done. He set the document down and looked directly at Leavitt, his gaze unwavering. "I've spent my life proving my loyalty to this country," he said, his voice rising with conviction. "I've risked my life in ways you can't imagine. Ms. Leavitt, I've stood in rooms where one wrong move meant death, all to protect the country you claim I don't understand. So before you lecture me about what it means to be American, maybe you should take a look at your own family's story." The audience was on the edge of their seats, some cheering, others wiping tears from their eyes. Leavitt, visibly shaken, tried to interject, her voice faltering. "This is irrelevant," she stammered. "My family's history doesn't change." The fact that but Patel cut her off, his tone firm but not angry. "It changes everything, Ms. Leavitt, because it shows that your entire argument is built on a lie. You don't get to decide who's American enough based on where their grandparents were born. Not when your own family was given a chance by people like mine." The studio erupted in applause, a wave of sound that drowned out Leavitt's attempt to respond. Even some of the camera operators nodded in approval, caught up in the moment. Leavitt sat frozen, her face flushed with a mix of anger and embarrassment. Chen, struggling to regain control, raised her voice. "Let's move on to the next question," she said. But the audience wasn't listening. They were on their feet, clapping, shouting, some chanting Patel's name. Social media was a wildfire, with clips of Patel's response going viral, shared by everyone from political analysts to everyday Americans. Kash Patel just ended her career. One tweet read, "This is what America's about," said another, accompanied by a photo of the Statue of Liberty. Leavitt, sensing the tide had turned against her, gripped her pen tightly, her knuckles white. As she realized the magnitude of her misstep, Patel, still calm, closed the folder and leaned back. In his chair, "Ms. Chen, I believe you had a question about border security," he said, his voice as steady as ever. The audience laughed, a release of tension that underscored the power of his performance. Leavitt, for the first time, looked small, her earlier confidence shattered. The debate was far from over, but in that moment, everyone in the room and millions watching at home knew that Kash Patel had just rewritten the script. This wasn't just a political takedown. It was a masterclass in turning an attack into a moment of unity. A reminder of what America could be when it embraced its diversity rather than weaponizing it. As the applause died down, Chen tried to steer the conversation back to policy, but the energy in the room had shifted irrevocably. Patel had drawn a line in the sand, not with anger or defensiveness, but with facts and a quiet, unshakable conviction. Leavitt, meanwhile, was left scrambling, her strategy in tatters, her campaign teetering on the edge of collapse. The nation watched, transfixed. As the debate became more than a clash of ideas, it became a mirror held up to America's soul, forcing everyone to confront what it truly meant to belong. The ABC studio in Manhattan pulsed with raw energy, the kind that follows a seismic shift in a high-stakes battle. It was October 2024, and the debate between Karoline Leavitt, the 29-year-old conservative firebrand running for a Texas Senate seat, and Kash Patel, the 42-year-old former national security advisor and son of Pakistani immigrants, had just taken a dramatic turn. Leavitt's inflammatory remark questioning Patel's Americanness had backfired spectacularly when he revealed her own family's immigrant roots, aided by a Pakistani-American merchant. The audience was on edge, their murmurs a mix of shock, amusement, and anticipation. Social media was ablaze, with hashtags like #CashDropsTruth and #Leavitt exposed trending worldwide. Patel, holding a slim folder of documents, stood poised to deliver a knockout blow, his calm demeanor masking the intensity of a man who had spent years outsmarting terrorists. Leavitt, her face pale and her confidence shaken, gripped the table, bracing for what was coming next. This was no longer a policy debate, was a reckoning, a moment that would force America to confront its deepest truths about identity and loyalty. NorahStories takes you inside the heart of this electrifying showdown, where one man's words would rewrite the narrative of a nation. The studio lights seemed to converge on Patel, casting him as the central figure in a drama that had gripped millions. His voice, steady but charged with purpose, cut through the tension like a blade. "Ms. Leavitt," he said, his eyes locked on hers, "you've built your campaign on the idea that only certain people, those with the right ancestry, can truly understand America. But your own family's story proves that's a lie." He held up the document he'd shown moments earlier, the one detailing how Leavitt's great-grandfather, William Leavitt, had immigrated from Ireland in 1883, sponsored by a Pakistani-American merchant named Amir Khan. The audience, still reeling from the irony, leaned forward. Sensing that Patel was far from finished, Leavitt, her lips pressed into a thin line, tried to interject. "This is a distraction," she said, her voice strained. "My family's history has nothing to do with the issues facing America today." But Patel shook his head, his smile faint but unyielding. "Oh, it has everything to do with it," he replied. "Because if you're going to question my place in this country, you'd better be ready to answer for your own." He opened the folder again, pulling out another sheet, this one yellowed and marked with the faint stamp of an immigration office. "Let's talk about your great-grandfather, William," Patel continued, his tone that of a prosecutor laying out evidence. "When he arrived in Boston, he wasn't exactly welcomed with open arms. The records show he faced suspicion, even hostility, from officials who thought he might be a burden on the system. They called him undesirable, a term they used. For a lot of immigrants back then, including those from Ireland, Italy, and, yes, South Asia." A murmur rippled through the audience, some nodding as they recognized the historical parallel. Patel's voice grew stronger, his words carrying the weight of someone who'd studied his opponent's weaknesses. But William didn't give up. He kept coming back, and he only got his chance because Amir Khan, a man who'd faced his share of prejudice, saw something in him. Amir gave him a job, a place to live, and a shot at the American dream. "That's the America I know, one where people lift each other, not tear each other down." The audience erupted in applause, a wave of sound that drowned out Leavitt's attempt to respond. Her face flushed, her earlier bravado replaced by a mix of anger and desperation. She leaned forward, her voice sharp. "Mr. Patel, you're twisting history to fit your narrative. My family earned their place here through hard work, not handouts. And I'm here to protect that legacy for Americans today." But the crowd wasn't buying it. Some booed, others shouted encouragement to Patel, who remained unfazed. He set the document down and leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "Hard work," he said, his voice laced with irony. "Ms. Leavitt, your great-grandfather's hard work wouldn't have meant a thing without the kindness of an immigrant who believed in him. And yet, here you are, telling me, a man who's risked his life for this country, that I don't belong because my parents weren't born here. That's not just hypocrisy. It's a betrayal of the very values you claim to defend." The studio was electric, the audience hanging on every word. Social media was a frenzy, with clips of Patel's response going viral at a record pace. 1. Tweet, shared thousands of times. Read, Kash Patel just turned Leavitt's family history against her. Game over. Another, with a clip of Patel holding up the document, was captioned, "This is what happens when you come for an intelligence operative with facts." Even liberal commentators, usually skeptical of Patel's political ties, were impressed. A prominent pundit posted, "I don't agree with Patel's policies." But this is a masterclass in dismantling prejudice with truth. The hashtag American Dream began trending alongside images of the Statue of Liberty. As Americans shared stories of their own families' immigrant journeys, Patel, sensing the moment, pressed his advantage. He stood up, a rare move in a seated debate, his presence commanding the room. "Let me tell you about my family, Ms. Leavitt," he said, his voice rising with a passion that silenced the crowd. "My parents came to Queens in 1976 with $200 and a suitcase. My father drove a delivery truck through blizzards, and my mother worked 12-hour shifts sewing clothes in a basement. They didn't ask for special treatment, they asked for a chance. And when they got it, they gave back tenfold. They paid taxes, they volunteered at community centers. And they taught me that America is a place where what you do matters more than where you're from." The audience was riveted, some wiping tears from their eyes, others nodding in agreement. Patel's voice softened, but its intensity remained. "I took that lesson to heart. I became a prosecutor, putting drug lords behind bars. I joined the fight against terrorism, going undercover in places most people wouldn't dare set foot. I've been shot at, threatened, and targeted dull to keep this country safe. So when you question my loyalty, Ms. Leavitt, you're not just questioning me. You're questioning every American who's ever fought for this country, no matter where their parents were born." The applause was deafening, a thunderous roar that shook the studio. Even some of the camera operators, hardened professionals, used to staying neutral, nodded in approval. Leavitt, visibly shaken, tried to regain her footing. "Mr. Patel, no one's denying your service," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But there's a difference between serving America and understanding its soul. Some of us were born with that understanding. It's in our history, our culture, our roots." The audience groaned, sensing she was doubling down on a losing argument. Patel shook his head, his smile now one of pity rather than triumph. "Ms. Leavitt," he said, "if you think America's soul is defined by how many generations your family's been here, you've missed the point of this country entirely. America's soul is in its promise that anyone, from anywhere, can become American if they're willing to work for it, fight for it, believe in it." At that moment, an unexpected voice broke the tension. A woman in the audience, a middle-aged nurse in a navy blue sweater, stood up, her hands trembling but her voice clear. "Mr. Patel," she called out, drawing every eye in the room. "I was in D.C. in 2018 when you helped stop that terrorist plot at the Capitol. My husband was a security guard there. He told me how you worked around the clock to keep us safe. I just want to say thank you." The studio fell silent, then erupted again, the applause even louder than before. The woman's impromptu testimony, unscripted and raw, added a layer of authenticity to Patel's story that no prepared speech could match. Social media lit up with posts about the mystery nurse, with users digging into archives to confirm her story. Sure enough, a 2018 operation credited to Patel's team had thwarted a major attack, a fact that had been overshadowed by political controversies at the time. Leavitt, now visibly rattled, tried to pivot. "I respect that, truly," she said, her voice faltering. "But we're here to talk about policy, not personal stories. Americans want to know how we'll protect our borders, not hear about," but the audience wasn't having it. Boos drowned her out, and Chen, sensing the moment's gravity, let it play out. Patel, still standing, turned to the camera, addressing not just the studio, but the millions watching at home. "This isn't just about me," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "This is about every American whose family came here with nothing but a dream. It's about the Irish, the Italians, the Pakistanis, the Mexicans, everyone who's been told they don't belong because of where they're from. America isn't a country club with a guest list. It's a nation, built by people who show up, work hard, and give back." The studio was on its feet now, the applause a tidal wave that seemed to shake the very walls. Even Chen, a veteran of countless debates, looked moved, her eyes glistening as she tried to regain control. "Mr. Patel, thank you," she said, her voice barely audible over the crowd. "Let's try to return to the question at hand." But everyone knew the debate had transcended policy. Patel had turned Leavitt's attack into a rallying cry, a defense not just of his own identity, but of the millions of Americans who saw themselves in his story. Leavitt, meanwhile, sat frozen, her hands clenched, her campaign unraveling before her eyes. Social media was relentless. Kash Patel just gave a masterclass in owning the moment. One influencer posted, with a clip of his speech racking up millions of views. Another tweet with a photo of Leavitt's stunned expression. "Read, when you realize you picked a fight with the wrong guy." Patel, sensing he'd made his point, sat down, his composure intact. But he wasn't finished. T turned to Leavitt, his tone now almost conversational. "Ms. Leavitt, I don't question your love for this country," he said. "But when you attack people like me, you're attacking the very idea that makes America exceptional. You're telling millions of people who fought, worked, and sacrificed, that they'll never be American enough because of where their parents were born. That's not leadership. That's division." The audience roared. Again, some chanting Kash. Kash, as Leavitt stared at the table, unable to meet his gaze. For the first time, she looked small. Her earlier confidence replaced by the stark realization that she'd misjudged her opponent and the moment. Chen, trying to salvage the debate, moved to the next question, but the energy in the room was electric. The focus squarely on Patel. Producers in the control room, watching the ratings skyrocket, knew they were witnessing a historic moment. The debate had become a cultural touchstone, a clash that went beyond politics to the heart of what it meant to be American. On social media, the narrative was shifting rapidly. Conservative commentators, usually quick to defend Leavitt's brand of populism, were divided. One prominent pundit tweeted, "Kash Patel just reminded us what conservatism should be about. Merit, not ancestry." Even liberal voices, often critical of Patel's political ties, praised his response. "This is what grace under fire looks like," a progressive activist posted. Patel didn't just win a debate. He won hearts. As the debate continued, Leavitt struggled to regain her footing, her responses sounding hollow and rehearsed. She tried to pivot to policy, talking about border security measures and economic impacts, but the audience was distracted, still buzzing. From Patel's takedown, Patel, meanwhile, answered questions with the same calm authority, weaving in references to his work in counterterrorism and his belief in America's promise. Each answer felt like an extension of his earlier point. That loyalty and service, not birthright, defined an American. The contrast between the two candidates was stark. Leavitt's rhetoric felt increasingly desperate, while Patel's was grounded in a conviction that resonated across party lines. Then came another unexpected moment. During a brief pause, a young man in the audience, wearing a veteran's cap, stood up. "Mr. Patel," he said, his voice shaking but resolute, "I served in Afghanistan, and I heard about your work there. You saved lives, my buddies and mine. Don't let anyone tell you you're not American." The studio erupted again, the applause a testament to the emotional weight of the moment. The veteran's words, like the nurse's earlier, were unscripted, a raw expression of gratitude that amplified Patel's narrative. Social media seized on it, with users posting, "This debate is giving me chills. Kash Patel is America." The hashtag Patel for America began trending, a spontaneous call for him to seek higher office. Levy, now visibly deflated, tried one last time to redirect the conversation. "I think we're losing focus here," she said, her voice thin. This debate was supposed to be about protecting Americans, not digging up old family stories. But the audience wasn't listening. They were with Patel, who had turned a personal attack into a universal message. He looked at Leavitt, his expression not one of triumph, but of resolve. "Ms. Leavitt," he said, "if you want to protect Americans, start by recognizing that we're all in this together. Migrants, veterans, nurses, truck drivers, everyone. Oh, that's the America I've fought for, and that's the America I'll keep fighting for." The studio exploded in applause, the sound carrying through the broadcast to millions of homes. Chen, realizing the debate was no longer hers to control, let the moment linger, her expression one of quiet respect. Leavitt sat back, her face a mask of defeat as the reality of her miscalculation sank in. Patel had not only dismantled her argument, but had done so with a grace and authenticity that left the audience and the nation speechless. The debate was far from over, but the tide had turned irrevocably. This was no longer about winning a Senate seat or scoring points. It was about defining what it meant to be American in a divided age. The ABC studio in Manhattan was still reverberating from the seismic clash that had unfolded just moments ago. It was October 2024, and the debate between Karoline Leavitt, the 29-year-old conservative firebrand vying for a Texas Senate seat, and Kash Patel, the 42-year-old former national security advisor and son of Pakistani immigrants, had become a defining moment in American political history. Leavitt's attempt to question Patel's Americanness had been dismantled with surgical precision when he revealed her own family's immigrant roots. Aided by a Pakistani-American merchant, his passionate defense of the American dream, backed by unscripted testimonials from a nurse and a veteran, had left the audience roaring and social media ablaze with hashtags like #CashDropsTruth and #AmericanDream. Leavitt sat slumped in her chair, her once confident demeanor replaced by a stunned silence. While Patel, calm and resolute, had transformed from a policy wonk into a national symbol of unity. As the studio lights dimmed and the applause faded, the consequences of this moment were just beginning to ripple across America, reshaping careers, conversations, and the very definition of what it meant to be American. NorahStories brings you the final chapter of this electrifying saga, where one career crumbles, another soars, and a nation grapples with its identity. The immediate aftermath of Patel's devastating response was unlike anything ABC had ever seen. As Lila Chen, the seasoned anchor, struggled to steer the debate back to policy, the audience remained fixated on the drama that had just unfolded. Social media platforms were in overdrive, with clips of Patel's speech racking up millions of views within minutes. The hashtag Leavitt exposed trended #1 globally, alongside #Patel for America, as Americans from all walks of life shared their reactions. A viral meme showed Patel calmly holding his folder of documents with the caption, "When you bring facts to a feelings fight." Another, featuring Leavitt's pale, shocked expression, read, "When you realize you've just lost the internet." Conservative commentators, usually quick to rally behind Leavitt's brand of populism, were split. A prominent radio host tweeted, "Kash Patel just reminded us what conservatism should stand for: merit and service, not division." Even liberal voices often critical of Patel's political ties couldn't help but applaud. A progressive columnist posted, "I've never agreed with Patel's policies, but that was a masterclass in dignity. He spoke for every immigrant kid who's ever been told they don't belong." Leavitt, sensing the tide had turned against her, tried to salvage the moment. Her voice, now thin and unsteady, cut through the lingering applause. "I think we've gotten sidetracked," she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "My point was never to question Mr. Patel's service, but to emphasize that America needs leaders who instinctively understand its values." The audience groaned, some shouting "too late," as her words fell flat. The attempt at damage control only deepened the hole she dug as social media users pounced on her backpedaling. She's still trying to gatekeep American values after that takedown. One tweet read, accompanied by a rolling eyes emoji. Another user posted a clip of Leavitt's earlier attack, captioned, "This aged like milk in 30 seconds." The internet was merciless, and within minutes, Leavitt's campaign team was in crisis mode, fielding calls from panicked donors and strategists. Patel, meanwhile, remained a picture of composure. He answered Chen's next question about cybersecurity with the same measured precision, weaving in references to his work disrupting terrorist networks. But his words carried a new weight, as if each answer was a continuation of his earlier defense of the American dream. The audience hung on his every word, some still wiping tears from their eyes, others whispering to their neighbors about the nurse and the veteran who'd spoken up. Those unscripted moments had added a layer of authenticity to Patel's narrative that no campaign ad could replicate. The nurse, later identified as Maria Torres, a first-generation Mexican-American, became a minor celebrity online, with users sharing her story of working double shifts during the 2018 Capitol threat. The veteran, John Carter, a former Marine, posted a video on social media later that night, recounting how Patel's team had coordinated intelligence that saved his unit from an ambush in Afghanistan. "That man's a hero," Carter said, his voice choked with emotion. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." As the debate wrapped up, Chen thanked both candidates, her voice betraying a hint of awe at what she'd just witnessed. "Has been one of the most memorable debates in recent history," she said, and the audience roared in agreement. Leavitt managed a tight smile, but her eyes betrayed her fear. Patel, ever the professional, nodded politely, his expression serene, but resolute. As the cameras panned out, the contrast between the two was stark. Leavitt looked like a boxer who'd taken one too many hits, while Patel radiated the quiet confidence of a champion. The broadcast ended, but the story was far from over. Within hours, the political landscape began to shift in ways that no one, not even Patel, could have predicted. By the next morning, Leavitt's campaign was in freefall. 3 major donors, including a prominent Texas oil magnate, announced they were pulling their funding, citing concerns about her judgment. Her campaign manager, a seasoned operative who'd weathered countless controversies, resigned via a curt email stating irreconcilable differences in strategy. The Texas Republican Party, which had endorsed Leavitt months earlier, issued a carefully worded statement distancing itself from her remarks. "We believe in a conservatism that values character and contribution over ancestry." The blow was devastating, as Leavitt's entire campaign had been built on her image as the future of the party. Her staff began to fracture, with her communications director and 2 senior aides announcing their departures within 24 hours. One aide, whose grandparents had immigrated from Vietnam, cited personal reasons but later told a reporter, "I couldn't stay after what she said. My family's story is like Patel's hard work, sacrifice, and love for this country." Leavitt scrambled to contain the damage. She held a press conference the next day, flanked by a handful of loyal supporters, and tried to reframe the debate. "My comments were taken out of context," she said, her voice strained but defiant. I was simply highlighting the importance of leaders who share America's core values, not questioning anyone's citizenship. The explanation rang hollow, especially since the entire exchange was available online, replayed endlessly on news channels and social media. Critics pointed out that she was still implying a hierarchy of Americanness, a stance that only deepened the backlash. A viral video showed her press conference side by side with Patel's response, with the caption, "When you try to spin a knockout." By the end of the week, Leavitt's poll numbers had plummeted, and political analysts were openly speculating about whether she could salvage her Senate run. "She's toast," one pundit declared on a cable news panel. You can't recover from a moment like that when the whole country's watching. For Patel, the debate was a turning point that elevated him from a respected but low-profile figure to a national hero. Speaking invitations poured in from across the country, from conservative think tanks to progressive universities. A major publisher offered a seven-figure deal for his autobiography, tentatively titled American by Choice. Political operatives began floating his name for higher office: governor, senator, even a long-shot presidential run. But what struck observers most was how Patel's response transcended party lines. A bipartisan group of veterans launched a campaign called Service Over Ancestry, using Patel's story to advocate for unity. Immigration advocacy groups, usually wary of his conservative credentials, embraced him as a symbol of the immigrant experience. With one organization tweeting, "Kash Patel just said what we've been saying for years. America's strength is its people, not its borders." The broader impact of the debate was felt in the national conversation about identity and belonging. Patel's words sparked a wave of personal stories online as Americans shared their family histories under the hashtag #MyAmericanStory. A teacher from Ohio posted about her great-grandparents fleeing persecution in Poland. A software engineer from California shared how his parents, refugees from Somalia, built a new life in America. The stories were a powerful reminder that the nation was a tapestry of diverse origins, woven together by shared values. Even some conservative leaders, traditionally skeptical of immigration, began to shift their rhetoric. A prominent senator, whose parents had immigrated from Cuba, tweeted, "Kash Patel's right. America's about what you do, not where you're from. Let's stop dividing and start uniting." The debate also exposed fault lines within the Republican Party. While some leaders rallied behind Patel, others, loyal to Leavitt's America First brand, tried to downplay the controversy. A Texas congressman, a vocal supporter of Leavitt, posted a tepid defense. "Karoline's heart is in the right place, even if her words missed the mark." The statement was met with swift backlash, with users accusing him of enabling division. Even former President Trump, known for his fierce loyalty to allies like Leavitt, found himself in a bind. In a post on Truth Social, he wrote, "Kash Patel is a great American who served our administration with honor. We need legal immigrants who love this country. Karoline's a fighter, but we must focus on unity." The statement, carefully worded, was widely seen as a subtle rebuke of Leavitt, a stunning shift for someone who rarely abandoned his supporters. Then came a bombshell that deepened Leavitt's woes. A veteran investigative journalist, Sarah Nguyen, published a report revealing that Leavitt's campaign had deliberately obscured her family's immigrant history to craft her born-and-bred American image. Nguyen's article, backed by public records and interviews with Leavitt's distant relatives, showed that her team had rejected a proposed ad highlighting her Irish roots, fearing it would weaken her appeal to nativist voters. The revelation was a gut punch, confirming what Patel had implied. Leavitt's entire campaign was built on a selective narrative that ignored her own family's story. Social media erupted with outrage, with one user posting, "She hid her immigrant roots while attacking Patel's. That's next-level hypocrisy." The hashtag Leavitt cover-up began trending, further eroding her credibility. As the weeks passed, Leavitt's campaign unraveled. She withdrew from the Senate race in early November, citing personal reasons, though insiders knew the truth. Her candidacy was untenable. At a tearful press conference, she apologized, her voice breaking. "I never meant to offend anyone," she said. "I love this country and wanted to fight for it. I made a mistake, and I'm sorry." The apology did little to stem the tide of criticism, as many felt it was too little, too late. Leavitt retreated from public life, her once promising career in tatters. Political analysts speculated that she might re-emerge in a few years, perhaps in a less visible role. But for now, her star had fallen. Patel, meanwhile, became a beacon of hope in a polarized nation. He declined most media interviews, letting his debate performance speak for itself. But when he did speak, his message was consistent. America's strength lies in its ability to embrace those who contribute, regardless of their origins. At a veterans event in Virginia, he received a standing ovation before he even spoke, a testament to his newfound status. "This isn't about me," he told the crowd, his voice humble but firm. "It's about every American who's ever been told they don't belong. We prove them wrong by showing up, working hard, and lifting each other." The speech, broadcast live, went viral, with clips shared alongside images of diverse Americans: farmers, soldiers, teachers, all united by their love for their country. The debate's legacy extended beyond the two candidates. It forced a reckoning within the Republican Party, as leaders grappled with how to address immigration without alienating the diverse coalition that Patel represented. Candidates in the 2024 midterms began adopting a new rhetoric, emphasizing contribution over origin in their platforms. Immigration advocacy groups, buoyed by Patel's words, launched campaigns to highlight the stories of first- and second-generation Americans, with billboards in major cities displaying messages like "Immigrants built America. Let's build it together." Even the media, often criticized for fueling division, began to shift its coverage, with outlets running features on the contributions of immigrant communities. Perhaps the most enduring outcome was the way the debate reshaped America's conversation about identity. Political science professors began teaching Patel's response as a case study in effective communication, praising his ability to blend facts, emotion, and moral clarity. Community organizers used the moment to bridge divides, hosting town halls, where Americans shared their stories of belonging. One such event, held in Chicago, drew thousands, including Patel, who made a surprise appearance. "America's not perfect," he told the crowd, "but it's the only place where a kid from Queens, born to immigrants, can stand up and remind the world what we're capable of." The crowd roared, and for a moment, the divisions that had plagued the nation seemed to fade as the dust settled. The debate became more than a political moment, became a touchstone for a nation wrestling with its past and its future. Patel's response, rooted in truth and delivered with grace, showed that the best way to combat division was not with anger, but with a vision of unity. Leavitt's fall, while tragic, served as a cautionary tale about the dangers of weaponizing identity in a country built on diversity. The lesson was clear. America's greatness lay not in its exclusivity, but in its ability to create Americans out of anyone willing to embrace its values. Thank you for joining Norah Stories for the epic conclusion of this transformative story. Kash Patel's triumph and Karoline Leavitt's fall remind us that America's strength is in its people, not its divisions. What did you take away from this moment? Share your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to Norah Stories for more stories that inspire, challenge, and unite us. Let's keep the conversation going, because America's story is ours to write together.